So I'm here with legendary Hall of Famer artist Joe Sinnott for BeTerrific.com and on Twitch. And Joe, I want to talk to you a little bit about your Hall of Fame career.
Okay.
And it's such a pleasure to be with you today because, I mean, that FF run that you were on was the best thing in comics history, in my opinion.
Some people say that.
Right?
Yep.
Now, also, you had the distinct pleasure of working with Jack Kirby.
Exactly.
I hope it was a pleasure.
Naturally, there was.
Yes.
Yeah, I hated it when we were separated, let's say, you know?
Yeah, he lived on the West Coast mostly when you were, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
And it was many years before I even met him.
Really?
Or talked to him on the phone even. We never talked together on the phone.
That's interesting.
About any of the artwork. He never once called me and said, Joe, I'd like you to do this, or I'd like you to do that, or even to compliment me on what I was doing. So, and I never met him until I think it was the 1975
Marvel Convention. The
Marvel Convention,
right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So he came in town for that, and that's when you met him?
That's it.
And you've been in upstate New York the whole time, right? You lived there pretty much always, or you were in the Manhattan bullpen area type? Did you ever go in the office?
I was born in Saugerties.
Always,
I lived there all my life.
Wow.
I came down to the city in '49 to go to the Cartoonist and Illustrator School for 2 years. And I lived in the city then, of course. But then I moved back when Tom Gill gave me work. He was the first one. He wanted me to be his assistant. And it was Tom Gill who gave me...
I know Tom Gill, but he was doing a lot of Western titles at the time, right?
Yeah. So he gave me my start.
So that was early 50s?
Yes.
Okay. 51, 52?
1951, 52.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Now you were doing some backgrounds and inking for Tom Gill?
I was doing, well, originally when I started, I was inking Tom.
Oh, okay.
And then it got so that he let me a pencil, and he had someone inking it. I think it might have been Norman Steinberg.
Now I know that I've seen like Tales to Astonish, Tales to Suspense stories that you penciled.
Oh, well,
yeah.
When I first started with Stan Lee, in those days, you had a pencil and ink your own stuff.
Oh, okay.
There were very few teams, so to speak. Jack Kirby never inked his stuff.
Right.
He wasn't a good inker, but we know what he was as a penciler. But when I started with Marvel, 51, I penciled and inked everything up until 1962 or 61.
Wow. And that's when Stan, invented the Fantastic Four. Right then. So what did you go on to a hero book then, or did you start inking exclusively then?
Well, of course, I was with Stan for 68 years.
Wow.
And I'm 92, and Stan is 95.
Right, he's 95 now.
But in the early 60s, when I was still penciling and inking, we went belly up for 6 months.
Right, I remember that.
For a number of reasons. But then we started up again in 61. We were doing the monster book,
right,
if you remember.
Amazing Fantasy, Amazing Adult Fantasy,
yes.
Those ones.
So then,
right before Spider-Man.
Stan called me up and he asked me if I would ink a Jack Kirby story. He said, I can't get an inker, Joe. He said, but, and of course Jack doesn't ink his stuff. So I inked it, and he liked the combination. And when I got the pages from Jack, I couldn't believe the characters. I thought, gee, what great characters, you know?
Right.
And we were always looking for a new trend. And although we never thought that they would become as big as they did,
right,
it was just another another comic book. And of course, when the sales came in and Martin Goodman saw that they were selling, he asked Stan to create more characters. So that's when he did Thor, the Hulk, then Spider-Man in '62. And but we never thought they would expand to what they did. We just thought they were another comic, you know.
Wow, that's
and
interesting.
comics, as you know, they were in dire straits in the late.
Yeah,
50s.
there was that contraction that you alluded to, that you got shut down for a while. And Stan, didn't you have to make a deal with DC just to get some, like, 6 or 8 books distributed because DC had locked up the distribution?
They did.
Right?
A lot of it had to do with distribution.
Right, and getting that deal, or even getting the just stop.
Right.
They shut you down, didn't it?
But Stan was such a great innovator and a writer that we surpassed DC, actually.
That was
because
awesome.
of all the great characters.
Now, I have to ask you, because I've been an art dealer for about 30 years.
Yeah.
And I've seen stuff that Jack drew that was just unbelievably beautiful. But then I saw, not to be negative or cast aspersions, but I saw George Russo's and, Dick Ayers, not doing his best work on top of Jack for those FF issues. Why did it take 35 issues later for you to become Jack's, proprietary inker and make his art sing the way it did?
Well,
because his art was there before, but was just being lost with bad inkers.
You're right. I hate to say it, but
but it has to be said, because I've seen the art and it was just, oh my God, it's there.
I know.
What happened to it? Coletta happened to it, and Russo's had it, but
Well,
but then when you came on, you made it the most beautiful stuff that ever lived in comics, and that's how I attribute you, to you.
I like to think it was because I put a lot of my art into it, and I always thought that I was a pretty good penciler. I did a lot of nice stuff for Treasure Chest magazine.
Yeah.
And that's the reason. Of course, I worked every year for Stan, but I don't know how I did so much work back in those
I know you were
days.
doing 100-page novelettes, graphic novels. You could say of the treasuries, right?
Exactly.
Weren't they 100 pages?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That was
Yes.
crazy. And you were penciling and inking those in large art.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
for Treasure Chest, I penciled and inked the lives of MacArthur and Eisenhower, Kennedy, Babe Ruth. They used to give me all
The Pope. Didn't you do the Pope too?
Yes, in fact, my son has one of the Pope books here
Yeah.
today. That was the hardest thing I ever worked on. And but I also did the Beatles for Dell. These companies used to call me up because they knew I did fairly good likenesses, and they wanted me to do their books. And so I was juggling a lot of work for maybe 3 companies. So that's the reason that I was only doing the FF. But then again,
Take some pictures.
With Jack Kirby, I did some Thors. I did Captain America.
You did that. You did a Thor all by yourself too.
Yes, I did about 5 or 6 of them.
Right. Yeah. Okay. In the 80s and early 90s of issues.
Journey in the Mystery,
Right.
they were at that time.
Right.
And of course.
Now let me ask you a question about when you were doing the Journey into Mystery books and the fantasy books and the war books. You did some of all that kind of stuff.
Right.
All those kind of genres. Now, was Stan? How much of that stuff was Stan actually writing?
Well, at the time,
All of it.
I thought he was writing all of it.
Right.
And he was a, prodigious writer. He was fast. And when you go into his office, there he'd be sitting behind his desk with a stack of yellow paper, legal, the yellow line paper, and he put it in his typewriter, and he typed it away. And we used to say, we used to kid him. We used to say that the stories were all the same, only the names were changed. You know? but Stan was a good writer.
Mr. Smith turns into an alien. Mr. Johnson turns into an
yes,
alien. Right?
But he could use the same story in a Western.
Right? That's funny. But those 5 or 6 they were like mostly 6-pagers.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. And so then he would like plot those out for you like on a single piece of paper, and then
they were typed out.
Yeah.
A full script, and they would, of course, it was left up to you to interpret those.
The panels,
the
pacing.
Any way you wanted. In other words, Stan would say, for example, have Spider-Man leaping off a fire escape onto a mugger in the alleyway. You could see it 100 different ways.
Sure.
And you drew it the way you thought it would look best, you know?
Right.
So you didn't have to follow, Stan didn't have to say, show wearing a certain type of clothes, or he left everything up to the artist. Really.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So that was part of what is considered the Marvel way nowadays. Like you guys would do the panels, and then he would write in the dialogue afterwards.
That came later.
Okay.
That's the new Marvel way.
Okay.
I mean, when I say later, it was years ago, but it wasn't the way we originally did things.
Okay.
But of course, a lot of the pencilers.
You guys got so busy.
Yeah, but a lot of the
Mid-60s,
guys
right?
did like that. We felt we were doing the writer's work, you know.
Okay.
We were telling the story, and Stan, for example, would just put the dialogue in, you know.
Okay.
He'd look at the drawings and fit the dialogue to the drawings, and so we were in a way telling the story, writing the story.
Right.
And then Stan would put the dialogue down.
Okay, but it's somehow the magic worked.
Oh, I remember
didn't it?
John
I mean,
he resented working that way.
Oh, he didn't like that?
No,
John?
he felt he was doing Stan's work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the FF, because that's like such a legendary run you had. Why did it take, until from issue 5, a one-shot, to issue 44, to make that combination work and be there for the next, 50 some issues, right?
Oh, well, yes.
And then,
At least maybe in the 60s. I did number 5, of course.
I mean, were you too busy doing Treasure Chest and other jobs like that?
He sent me number 6.
Oh.
And he loved it. Number 5. And he said, Joe, whatever you do, don't leave us. I remember him saying that.
Oh my God.
And then I mailed number 6 back to him. I did 1 or 2 panels when my script came in from Treasure Chest. I had promised them I would do the life of Pope John the 23rd.
Right, the Pope story.
It was about 60 pages, pencil and ink. And so I called Stan and I said, Stan, I got to do this book for Treasure Chest.
And they were paying a lot better, right?
Oh, they did pay better.
Yeah, I understand.
And it was the kind of work I wanted to do.
Okay.
Do my own pencil and ink. And I love doing biographical stories.
That really appealed to you.
I was really good at that.
Oh, of course you were.
So Treasure Chest, they kept me so busy and they were paying me better that it was hard for me to do much work for Marvel, although I was doing at least 1 book a month for them. So it got up to, I think it was 44, and Stan called me and he said, Joe, he says, I can't get anybody to ink Jack's Fantastic Four. You think you could squeeze it in? So I remember it was Gorgon, and I did that. Stan called me up and said, Joe, we love the combination of you and Jack. And he said, I hope you can stay with it. And I did. I stayed on it until up in the 90s.
Right.
And I called up Stan. I said, Stan, I had never taken a vacation. I said, Stan, I'm burned out. I said, I got to take a vacation. So that's when Frank Giacoia, I think he did 1 or 2 issues. And then I went back on it until 100, FF 100. And so anyway, the Kirby was and Stan weren't getting along.
Yeah.
That's when he left to go over to DC.
To DC, yes.
Then a lot of guys came on. Ramita, John Verport, and
Right, but just for a couple issues though.
Yosemite.
Yeah, and then John did a few.
Yes.
And then he picked, then he did Stan develop Rich Buckler for that job? Or,
Well,
I mean, did you
Rich
kind of
Buckler-
have to transition Rich into it? Because I know those early issues that you inked for Rich, like, they work. I mean, they you know,
Well,
you probably
I think
broke them
it was
into the book,
because-
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't that I was trying to make everything look. I was trying to make look somewhat like the FF that Kirby and I were doing. And of course, Rich Buckler, when he first started, he had a lot of Kirby influence in his panels, and of course he probably swiped a lot of Kirby layouts and whatever.
Okay.
And he needed, as most young artists, he needed a little picking up.
Yeah, sure. That's what I alluded to, yeah.
So a lot of Rich's early work had a lot of my work into it.
Yes, I know that. Yes, absolutely. I see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's what Stan wanted, you know.
Right.
He liked everything I was doing. Even with me, Sam, as good an artist, he was the best, of course.
Oh, John, yeah, it was amazing. One of my favorites of all time.
But I couldn't help but put a little of my own work into his occasionally, you know. And it's pretty hard to do that, but everybody, no matter who they are, they're not perfect. Kirby was not perfect, and as good as Buscema was, he was not perfect. So there were always times you could...
John wasn't perfect?
No, it's hard to say that. And of course,
you couldn't let him hear you say
I
that.
wouldn't dare say that.
He was a bear of a man. He was grumpy too soon.
I couldn't say enough about Buscema.
Oh, he was amazing.
me-
Some of my favorite things aren't the stuff that he did on the front of the pages, but his drawings on the back of the pages.
I have some great stuff
right?
with drawings on the back.
Right.
He could draw. He would draw cowboys and
Yeah.
and
Warriors
soldiers,
and soldiers.
all that stuff.
Yes.
He was the Michelangelo of comic.
Yes.
In fact, he looked like Michelangelo. He really did. And I think he was the reincarnation of Michelangelo.
Yeah. So I'm here with legendary Hall of Famer artist Joe Sinnott for BeTerrific.com and on Twitch. And it's such a pleasure to be with you today because, I mean, that FF run that you were on was the best thing in comics history.